All right, team, we'll go ahead and get started here. Firstly, thank you all for coming out here today for Speaker Series. Speaker Series is a program that we launched in fall of 2022 here at the Garage Chicago. Was anybody around for those attending? A couple hands, okay. Super cool experience back then, and we had 3 sessions back to back to back in the fall. We started off with my buddy and fellow movement co-founder, HYROX elite athlete here now, Brett Gornick, speaking on holistic wellness. We had Mark Howe and Lauren Rontala, who at the time were the mixed doubles HYROX world champions, speak on their sobriety journey. And then lastly, Garage member, Amelia Belmonte, and registered dietitian, speaking on the importance of nutrition and pairing that with our training here that we do at the Garage. So we're just so lucky today to have Dr. Meg Flynn here with us from the American Hip Institute. She's a sports orthopedic surgeon and going to be speaking to how we can better control what we control throughout our training to help mitigate injuries here, and speaking to longevity and durability, all those components. And while we have some solid structure with direction and intention here with our programming and our training, we know that those classes here or personal training sessions last roughly 60 minutes or so, and there's a lot of things that go on outside of here. So how can we better control those things to set us up to be in the best position to continue doing what we love? So I'm going to hand it over to Meg here, but we will have some time at the end for some Q&A as well. So awesome. Let's do a quick little clap
Thanks,
here for Meg.
Well, first, thank you so much, Ryan and Gina, obviously, for bringing this together. I reached out to Gina a couple weeks ago, mostly because the injury prevention piece of what I do is not nearly as, I don't see that every day, right? Because in a clinic experience, I see people who are coming in with pain. You know, someone who is already there with shoulder pain or hip pain or knee pain or elbow pain. And one of the things that I really feel strongly about is prevention. If I never see one of you in my clinic, that means that we're doing the right things kind of around the country, and making sure that we stay as healthy as possible. Another thing, so just as a sort of background, a little story time, I was a Division I runner at the time where the discussion around training was miles, more miles, faster miles. We had 1 day of strength training per week, and that was primarily body weight stuff. And relatively, for me, early in my career, I got a stress fracture and then wasn't really able to compete at that level really up until now, right? When I started doing things that were more geared toward strength, mobility, although don't ask me to do anything, to touch my toes or anything, it's not gonna happen. But strength, mobility, and then using different energy systems across the different, the different exercises that we're doing. And I think that is all, and that's all been shown in literature and research to be really beneficial. And so as I've made my way through my medical journey, I've done a lot of research on biomechanics and the way that we move. I've done research on outcomes based on like kids. I did a lot of research on elbow injuries, shoulder injuries. And what that's shown us is focusing too much on one thing can put us at risk for injuring that thing. So I don't know if anyone here has kids, planning to have kids, or has kids that they love who are not theirs. If there's anything that I can say to people who have athletes as children, it is to let them do as many sports as possible. And I feel that same way about adults, right? So the people who spend all their time, doing max reps, in the gym, and they do nothing else, they're not getting as much out of their, the possible longevity and the possible exercises that they possibly can. So yeah, we'll kind of talk through a couple different things, and I'll, certainly we'll have questions at the end, but feel free to, ask questions as we go through. Okay, so, what are we going to talk about? 4 main things: training intensity, different exercise components, key injury prevention strategies based on specific body parts, and then recovery. So training intensity can be considered, so training intensity is like the big thing. There are 3 things that make up training intensity. It's frequency, so how often are you doing it? It is the intensity, how hard are you going after it? And then it's the duration, so how long are you doing things? So if you think of, training intensity, let's say you have 100, we say 150 minutes a week is the very basic line, the basic number that we're telling people to get in their everyday lives. Some people could get that in a day, right, in a single session. Other people are taking 7 days to get that 150 minutes of intensity. So when you're thinking of intensity, and we'll talk about this, but you really want to be, if your goal is to increase your capacity, the best, in my opinion, and sort of what data has shown, is that you want to do that increase by 10% per week. So let's say we have somebody who's training for a half marathon, and they've been doing maybe 10 miles a week for the last several weeks. I don't want them from 1 week, they decide, okay, now I'm gonna do 20 miles a week. They just increased their intensity, their duration, their frequency. They doubled it. Like, they didn't go up by 10%, they doubled it. So those are things that you really kind of have to think about, especially when we start to train for things like the Apex Games or things like a half marathon or a marathon. Be really intentional about how you are increasing that intensity, that frequency, that duration, because going from 3 30 sessions a week to 6 1-hour sessions a week, that's gonna put a big toll on you. So be really intentional about the way that you're increasing your intensity throughout your training cycles. And again, all 3 of those things kind of fit into it. Increase no more than 10 to 20% per week. And again, that's a little bit nuanced, right? Like if you're on the couch and you all of a sudden want to do things, 10% is going to be, that's 10% of nothing, right? So maybe start by twice a week, 3 times a week. Now, in this room, we've got people who are here 3, 4, 5 times a week. So really figuring out, if you're going to add a session, are you also going to add intensity and duration to that session, or should you maybe dial it back and do something a little bit different? And I know that here at the garage, the staff, the coaches, the programming around everything that's done here is really intentional to help keep people as strong and as resilient as possible. So take advantage of those things, right? There's strength, there's mobility, there's there's endurance. So really, I'm really excited to be here talking to this group of people, because you kind of you have a lot of the foundations, a lot of those things already, which is great. So just like taking advantage of those things is really important. Okay, different components. So there's strength training, clearly important, and something that I'm really excited to see has changed, or sort of we've been a part of the change from the 60-minute SoulCycle, cardio classes, to giving ourselves opportunities to get stronger and to not be afraid of lifting heavier weights in the gym, and going from 2 and 5 pound weights to, hey, I'm going to deadlift that 205 pound or 400 pound weight, right? And really giving ourselves that opportunity to see those strength gains. So strength training, cannot speak enough to the importance of it, no matter what your goals are. And this is for your life now, but almost more importantly for your life in 30 and 40 years. I saw, and you guys may have seen this too, but there's a really great, it was probably a meme on Instagram at some point, but I totally recognize how funny it is that I cannot get off the toilet right now because I hope to be able to get myself off the toilet in 40 years. So it's important. It's important to strengthen our muscles. That helps to increase our bone density, particularly for women. particularly for people who have lived in the Midwest for forever. It's really important to strength train. And then there's also this multimodal neuromuscular programs that increase and that incorporate strength training, plyometrics, balance, and core stabilization. So those 4 things, integral to us, having a resilient, long, not injury-free, because that's, everybody has some sort of tweaks in our lives, but gives ourselves the best opportunity to avoid those injuries. What's interesting is kind of looking through the data, stretching alone, so no strength involved as well, but stretching alone does not seem to impact longevity or injury prevention. So so you really want to add in and make sure that you are utilizing that strength to kind of balance that stability and range of motion. So let's see what else we got. Okay. So what are things that are important? Stabilizing your joints as you're going through the ranges of motion. So whatever is moving, you want to make sure that that's stable. Proper form. So make sure that you got the range. And this is something that I'm really, really, I've been really impressed by the garage, is make sure that you have the technique and the range of motion down before you add the weight. Because once you start adding weight, you're going to decrease that range of motion, you're going to lose, and that could potentially injure yourself. So maintain that range of motion over increasing the weight, and then you'll continue to improve. If you want to do single-sided exercises, I love these. Like a B stance RDL, it's my favorite. Love that. Yeah, we got a couple of smirks. Over there. But single-sided exercises, those help because we are two-sided individuals, but a lot of us are dominant, one side versus another. And our motion is different. So like if you try to bring your arms behind your back, like one set of fingers is going to go a little bit higher than the other side, right? That's kind of the way that we're made. You might have one set of fingers that's a little bit longer, one set of toes a little bit longer. So our bodies are not symmetric. And so training one side versus the other also trains the core 100%, 100% of the time, which is important. Full body exercises as you can, core stability and hip stability are really important. So this group of photos, I don't know if you can see it, but hopefully if you guys want to come up, you can. But there's 3 sets of photos, and these were photos that we took from a study that we did when I was in fellowship at the American Sports Medicine Institute. And it's pictures of people who are jumping off of a box, and this is the way that they are landing. So you see this, right? We have a bunch of electrodes on them so we can measure where they are in space. And you see in all 3 of these individuals, they're landing like this, right? In valgus. It's terrible. This is terrible. This is a single lone predictor for ACL injury. Hugely important to evaluate this. So when you're doing plyometrics, or when as a coach you're watching people do plyometrics, you really want to watch the way that people are landing. So you can see really not great. And you might be thinking, oh, well, maybe these people aren't really athletes. Maybe these are people who just were pulled off the street and started this study. Well, I've got another photo for you. This one, this group. This is at the NFL Combine. I don't know if you can see this. This is at the NFL Combine. This is right. This is a gentleman who, in broad jumps, this is how he landed.
Is it because they're not training deceleration?
And abductor strength.
Got it.
Yeah, and external rotation. Yep. And jump and landing mechanics. Yeah. And power, right? This gentleman was drafted and tore his ACL 3 months into the season.
Wow.
Wild.
Power training wise, do you recommend like one session a week?
I think it depends on sort of where people are. Absolutely,
Yeah.
one a week. I think it's important.
Yeah.
And that's sort of more plyometrics plus power. I think both of those together is really helpful. But yeah, I think that's super valuable. And doing things, like we said, single-sided and with stability. So, single-legged medicine ball passes, that really helps to maintain sort of that core stability and those smaller muscles that we don't necessarily think about. But so when we're doing back squats, when we're doing jumps, really focusing on keeping those knees outside. Strengthening abductors, adductors. This is also not just this is a core hip stability problem. And like I said, we see it in individuals who are untrained, and we see it in highly, highly trained individuals. I was embarrassed, so I go to, there's an FFC up in Park Ridge, which is kind of close. It's on my way to and from work. And it was really great one day. I saw a dad and his kid was probably, I don't know, 10 or 11 maybe. It looked like he was just trying to get into weight training, getting into those things. And so his dad had him trying, do box jumps, and he was landing like this. And it was one of those situations where me as a regular human in the gym, I'm sitting there and I'm like, don't say anything. Don't say anything. Don't say anything. You can't say anything. But then finally I walked over and I said, hey guys, I'm an orthopedic surgeon. Do you mind if I'm really impressed with the things that you're doing. Do you mind if I talk about a few things? And luckily and had they said no, I'd been like, okay, fine, great. But I showed them these photos that I had, and then came up with a plan with them. Hopefully make that a little bit better. But it's one of those situations where I truly did for like 5 or 6 minutes. Was like, I can't say anything. I really can't. And I was like, I have to, or else I'm going to see this kid in 2 months. But really focusing on that external rotation, that abductor strength, that core strength, hip, glute, super, super important. Again, this is something that we see in highly trained individuals and people who are untrained as well. So as coaches, and I know a bunch of people in here are coaches, really looking out for those things. And then obviously the programming that you all do is really important as well. Okay, so some key injury prevention strategies based on sort of specific, based on everything. So make sure that you're warming up and cooling down. This is another thing that I'm always very impressed by the staff here. Do a really great job of warming up and starting slow, right? Getting those range of motions, getting those cars in, slowly increasing the ranges of motion and that mobility. And then, like we talked about, strength training, balance training, plyometrics, as much as you can, low impact or as low as possible cardio. I know there's a couple people here who are training for running things, right? HYROX, athlon games for sure, marathon, half marathon. And some things that I've learned in running and having treated a lot of runners, the best surface for running tends to be, if you can find a track or a trail, those are great because those are a little bit softer. Asphalt is better than cement. So if you can run in a street, it's going to be better than running on a sidewalk. And that's why the lakefront path just needs to be torn up and redone, in my opinion. Yes, right. Yes, exactly. Maneuver, get over there as much as you can. That is going to decrease the impact. And over hundreds of thousands of steps, that's going to make a big difference in your life. Obviously, skis, row, great. Assault bike, great. Versa climbers, if you guys want to come over to my house, feel free. I've got a Versa climber up there. It's important to have that low impact cardio, zone 2 sort of cardio, and if that means walking, if whatever that means for you, important for the cardiovascular health and side effects of that. Okay, habits are more important than motivation, right? Because people always say like, oh, if I had the motivation, or oh, you must be so motivated. Like, no, I set my alarm at 4 o'clock and I wake up and I do it. I don't want to, right? And habits are going to be much more important for most people than living on motivation alone. And I think that's something that, as a community, is easier to build among one another. Because if you tell somebody that you're showing up to the 7 a.m. hybrid on a Saturday, you should show up, right? You have that accountability. Yeah, that accountability is so important. And the community that's been built here, I think, is one that is very, very special. And even if you aren't necessarily accountable to one human, I think you are. Most people feel accountable to the community to show up, which is great. So keep doing that for each other. I think that's hugely, hugely valuable. Okay. So prevention strategies to avoid back pain. I don't see a lot of back pain because where I am, we're primarily hip, knee, shoulder, elbow, sometimes ankle. So we don't see a whole lot of back. But the people who come in with back pain, it's always the same thing. Like I reached down, I did not use my legs. So really focusing on a neutral spine as often as possible. And this is something, you know, that I've noticed in myself even over the last, well, probably for forever, but keeping a neutral spine, right? Keeping your shoulder blades down and back, even if you're doom scrolling for a little while, right? Like you'll notice that you get into your shrimp, you know, your shrimp position. So shoulders down and back, tuck your pelvis, use your legs if you're lifting something heavy, right? Those are all things that can help to avoid, you know, lower back injuries and strains. There's a lot of things that can happen in the lower back, sciatica, et cetera, but yeah, these are some things that help with that in general. In your shoulders, so if you start noticing some shoulder issues, come to a neutral grip. So if you're bench pressing, change from a barbell bench to a dumbbell bench and go neutral. That's really helpful. So back to sort of bench press, if you're using dumbbells, use your legs to get those weights above your chest. So like if you're getting back, use your legs and then swing yourself back. When I was coaching this morning, we were doing a single arm dumbbell bench press, and hugely important to, even use both hands to get yourself into that position, especially because, which is great, people are going heavier. We love that. It also puts you a little bit more at risk. So bring those things in and out. This is one thing that I will always say too, because we do a lot of dumbbell bench presses, but end the same way, right? Bring them to your knees and come this way. I've had to fix more than one subscap for people who did this. It's terrifying. It's awful. Yeah, really, really bad. Starting and ending position, use your legs. Avoid flaring your elbows, right, for most exercises. So you don't want to be out here. That destabilizes the shoulder, right? Dropping it in, tucking in those lats can really be helpful. And then, strengthening your upper back, lower back, lots of rows, pulls as much as possible. Posterior chain has gotten more love in the last several years than it did any time when I was growing up. Super, super important. So strengthen that back. Hips, it's all in the hips, baby. Hinging, really, really valuable. Knowing the difference between a squat and a hinge, and what exercise you're supposed to be doing in that moment. Your glutes are incredibly, incredibly powerful. Glute max is an incredibly powerful muscle. And then your abductors, the medius and the minimus, also really, really valuable. So kind of getting back into sort of people landing like this, typically don't have strong enough glute med and min to keep their knees neutral. What can be helpful as well in hips, or if you're doing squats, ankle mobility, wildly important. I say that as someone with terrible ankle mobility. It's awful, but it is something that constantly trying to work on to get that more full range of motion. And then again, we're just sort of talking about single-sided exercises again, but that's a valuable piece to a well-rounded and a more agile sort of strength ability. Knees, again, we talked about hip abductors and adductors. This is all a lot of the same stuff. Another good photo, though, right? You see this man clearly has way too much weight on. Now, there are some things, like people do have really strong adductors. So there are some people when they're pushing out of their, like from the deep part of their squat out, will use their adductors, and they will sometimes have a little bit of internal rotation to get there. So as coaches, you kind of have to see that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
For like a lot of like Olympic lifters, they usually do that vagus. So you'd say like that's fine.
It depends on the person.
Yeah.
But typically in those individuals, like the ones who are, like the Olympic lifters, for instance, they're using their adductors to internally rotate to get themselves out of it. I would say most humans in that instance, they just don't have strong enough abductors to keep their legs out there. Does that make sense? Yeah. That's a good question.
I feel like a lot of those, like when you're watching them really slow, you don't see it on the descent. Yeah.
Yes, correct.
Which I feel like is kind of what
That's
you're
exactly.
alluding to, is like it does, like if you see it there, that's probably where it's a lot worse.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So when pushing off or out of it, extending, they're using more adductors. So you may see it in some strong individuals doing it that way, but you do want to make sure exactly on the deceleration heading down, you don't want to see it. Yeah.
Is that more just like longer femurs?
Can be.
Like,
Yeah.
Just tend to like.
Yes. Absolutely.
Just new weight, it can happen. Like first time trying a weight, struggling on the way up.
So that struggle, yes, because you're recruiting your adductors a little bit more than your quads.
First time you ever tried
Yeah.
a weight.
Yeah.
But it's like subtle.
Subtle.
You know what I mean? So you're like, it's not perfect, but you're like, okay,
Right.
try to get your knees out.
Right.
Right.
And that's another thing too, like footwear, right? What people are wearing when they're doing it. Yeah, if people have barefoot, great. But there are some people who have really flat feet, so being barefoot is probably terrible for them. So so you do kind of have to sort of evaluate those things too, because putting that extra pronation, on people who have flat feet can be really tough. Like my little brother, truly, like when he gets out of the shower and he steps in his bare feet, it looks like, I mean, literally flipper. Literally, yes, 100%. Just, it's so funny. It's so funny. He would be so embarrassed I'm saying this, but it's okay. It's fine. Recovery. So this is a big piece, and this is something that we could probably talk about, and something that we probably should talk about. And I will be the first person to tell you that I am much better at saying this than doing it myself. The nutrition piece, pretty dialed in. Sleep, nothing. Like this is like if you look at my sleep recovery from the last 6 years, probably longer, no good. That said, sleep is invaluable to strength, to your body's ability to recover, to your ability to build muscle. It is incredibly important. Nutrition, I generally tell patients or whoever, again, not a nutritionist, the closer you are, like the closer the food is to the ground that you're eating, the better off it is. So what I mean by that is, like, did it come from the ground? Fruits, vegetables, like whole grains, great. Did it eat something that came from the ground, right? Chicken, beef, etc. Anyway, the less processed it is, it's going to be better for you, right? These are all things that we know. A little bit easier, again, said than done. We can sort of talk about supplements. There's a lot around there. I love it. A lot to talk about when it comes to those things. I do think there's a lot of noise around supplementation and what's important. The things, I mean, I'll just talk about what I do. I do creatine. Have been doing it for probably about a year and a half or so. I started with 5. I now do 10 because there's some pretty good data to suggest that more than 5 per day is going to be helpful for brain health. So if that's something that you tolerate well, I think it's worthwhile. The gummies are probably silly. I don't think that that's a really good use of people's money when you can get the creatine powder and just stir it into water or coffee or something in the morning. So creatine, I think, is really important. Vitamin D, another supplement that we all need to be taking, particularly here in the Midwest. So when I was a chief resident, so this was back in 2019, healthy person, exercised, was a coach at Rise Nation, 4 or 5 times a week. I was also in the hospital for 80 or 90 hours a week, and I had a physical, and I had them get labs because I had been doing a study on vitamin D and sort of people who had femur fractures, and we got their vitamin D level when they came in with their femur fracture, and it was an outrageous number. It was like 80% of those people had minimal to low vitamin D. So the reference range for normal at the Cleveland Clinic was 25 to 100. So most of those people were coming in at 30 or less. And I was like, I'm just curious. And they were like, oh, well, you're healthy. We don't need to do it. I was like, I'm just curious. What's my vitamin D level? So in my normal labs, we added a vitamin D. My level was 7. It was 7. As an athlete, as someone who was so that really opened my eyes to what can happen. And then that puts your bones at risk, right, for fractures and everything moving forward. So,
what's the normal range?
So it depends on the lab, but usually it's 25 to 100, generally.
Medicine, I would always want
50 or higher, yeah.
especially athletes.
Especially athletes. And there's a study too that I saw the other day that there was a group of people, so it was a placebo-controlled study, blinded, so the people didn't know what they were getting, either placebo or vitamin D. And for 6 weeks leading up to a marathon, people either got placebo or 10,000 units of vitamin D. And they took their levels right after the marathon. So took their creatine kinase, so their CK, which is a measure of sort of muscle breakdown, and CKMB, which is one of the cardiac ones as well. And they all had this. Well, I shouldn't say that. There was a decrease in the elevation of the CKs in the people who had vitamin D, and it went down significantly faster in those people who had been supplemented with vitamin D as opposed to the people who had been on placebo. So if you are not on vitamin D, I highly recommend it. You can get it over the counter. I use 10,000 units, so you can get it at Walgreens or Target or whatever, and it'll say both micrograms and units. Get the 5,000 unit one, because that's typically the one you can get over the counter, and take 2. For most people, totally fine. There's not a whole lot of downsides to being hyper vitamin D. There's not a whole lot of downsides to that. So yeah, I have all my patients, especially patients who are having surgery where we do anything with the bone, even putting anchors into the bone or whatever. Absolutely, I put them on vitamin D.
It's cool to hear that you guys talk about supplements, or just even hearing you talk about supplements. Because for me, I didn't learn until I was in functional medicine, and I remember in the hospital, it's like we didn't really talk.
You don't talk about it.
As much.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, and in the hospital too, those are situations where that's acute problems, right? People in the hospital having very acute issues, and to the point of us doing this today, there's a very, very big difference between an acute problem and trying to make sure that you stay as functional and strong as possible. So yeah, I mean, I feel the same way, which is, again, I think that this is important.
Orthopedics though that you guys talk about with your patients?
That's a good question. Some people do. I think some people do.
Yeah, it is extra,
Yeah.
You have so much time.
There's only so much time, and that's one of the things actually that I started doing at the American Hip Institute, not just for my patients, but for all the patients who are having surgery with my partners. There are 5 surgeons there. We give people the option to have a conversation with me about how to optimize their nutrition and movement patterns and supplementation, nutrition, et cetera, before their surgeries. Because we have a bunch of people who come in with BMIs of 30, 40, 50. We don't do surgery. Our surgeries are elective, usually. So we tend to not do surgeries on patients who have BMIs over 40. So for those people, there's a big conversation that needs to happen around dropping that BMI so that they can get to a place where they're a little bit healthier. Yeah. Yeah.
What's your perspective on branched chain amino acids?
Oh, BCAAs. I mean, I don't know enough to be able to give you a really great, well-informed decision. They make sense to me. I have not seen anything about BCAAs that is particularly negative. Yeah. So I think it's fine if it's something that you are. And here's the thing: when it comes to these types of things, so like peptides. So we can talk about peptides in a second, but like peptides or red light therapy or any of those, any of the wellness influencer thing of the week. GLP-1. So we can certainly talk about that. If you don't have this stuff dialed in, like if you're not doing this stuff, that's not helpful. Right. Yeah. You're not, and is it even going to be helpful? Right. So, but yes, I think that those things are great and fine and probably not harmful. Thank you guys. Thank you.